Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling assistant clinical psychologists, and let me tell you, the materials you gave me on this one, someone out there is thinking big about this career path.
De Definitely aiming for some informed decisions, that's for sure. We're about to crack this career wide open, what it really takes, not just the surface stuff.
Music to my ears.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I hear assistant, I'm picturing paperwork mountains, maybe fetching the occasional coffee. But these materials, they paint a totally different picture, don't they?
Oh, forget the coffee runs. We're talking about diving headfirst into the world of patients. Think conducting interviews, giving those specialized psychological assessments, things like the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, the one that measures cognitive abilities, and even, get this, assisting in actual therapy sessions, all under the watchful eye of a licensed psychologist, naturally.
Okay, that is way more hands-on than I'd pictured. Suddenly, that social perceptiveness being a key skill makes a whole lot more sense.
It's not just about being friendly, right? You've got to be able to read between the lines, pick up on those unspoken cues from patients, factor in their backgrounds and cultures, all while building trust with, well, anyone who walks through that door. Emotional intelligence is the name of the game here.
You mentioned those specialized assessments, and it made me realize I actually don't know how they work. What's one that's commonly used, and what kind of insights do you get from it?
Well, take the thematic apperception test, the TAT. You show the patient a bunch of pictures, kind of mysterious ones, and they have to tell you a story about each one. What's wild is, those stories, they can reveal a ton about what makes the person tick, their emotions, how they see relationships, all sorts of hidden stuff. Fascinating.
It's like being a psychological detective.
Mhm.
But speaking of uncovering things, the materials don't shy away from the tougher parts of this job either. That emotional toll is real, isn't it?
It is. It's incredibly rewarding to help people, but let's be real, you're dealing with some heavy stuff.
Huh.
Assistants are often on the front lines of challenging patient situations, from managing crises to navigating those really tricky ethical dilemmas. Resilience and coping skills are non-negotiable in this line of work.
So not all sunshine and roses. Got it. Speaking of challenges, let's talk about getting the job itself. The materials mention this whole AI recruiter thing, which honestly sounds kind of intimidating.
It's the new frontier, no doubt. Lots of employers are using AI systems to sort through applications these days. But instead of thinking of it as this big scary hurdle, think of it as a chance to up your game.
Okay, I like that reframing it. So how do you appeal to both the human doing the hiring and the algorithm?
You got to speak their language, right? If the job ad mentions active listening and crisis intervention, guess what? Those exact phrases need to be in your resume. It's not about being sneaky. It's about making sure your skills don't get lost in the digital shuffle.
So it's like SEO, but for your resume.
Exactly. Optimize for both human eyes and those algorithms. And this is where those RoleCatcher links in the materials come in. It's like a cheat code for this whole process.
Okay, now that sounds like something we need to unpack. Tell me everything about how RoleCatcher can give aspiring assistant clinical psychologists a leg up. RoleCatcher, tell me more. It sounds like the secret sauce in this whole application game. But let's say you nail it, application, interview, boom. What's the actual career ladder look like for an assistant clinical psychologist?
It's not like a rigid ladder. It's more of a choose your own adventure kind of path. The materials talk about 5 stages, and each one comes with more responsibility, more specialization. So you usually start as an entry-level assistant, lots of assessments, assisting in those therapy sessions, maybe some admin stuff too.
So you really get your hands dirty, get a taste of everything right off the bat.
Exactly. Then as you get some experience under your belt, you might become a junior assistant, then senior assistant, handling tougher cases, maybe even supervising others, and it keeps going. Lead assistant, where you might be running a team or a whole program. And finally, the big kahuna principal assistant clinical psychologist.
Now that's a title, so you can really carve out your niche as you progress. Speaking of niches, you mentioned specializations earlier. What are some areas assistant clinical psychologists can really zero in on?
Oh, this is where it gets exciting. Think child and adolescent psychology. You could end up using play therapy, like using toys and games to help kids communicate. Or maybe substance abuse counseling is more your speed, helping people through addiction and recovery, that sort of thing.
Wow, those are so important right now. With everything going on, the need for people skilled in those areas is huge.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about our aging population, right? Geriatric psychology is a growing field, focusing on the unique mental health needs of older adults. The demand for folks who really know their stuff in these areas only going up.
It's amazing how this field just keeps evolving. Speaking of leveling up, the materials mention certifications, extra credentials that can give your career a boost. What are some of the big ones to consider?
Think of certifications as adding another tool to your belt, right? Like becoming a certified mental health technician, a CMHT. That tells everyone you're an expert in direct patient care. Super valuable. Or there's the Certified Clinical Mental Health Counselor credential, the CCMHC, which shows you're a pro at counseling and therapy techniques.
So many options. It's like specializing within your specialization.
Exactly. And if you're into substance abuse, that Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor certification, the CITC, that's a big one.
Okay, so these certifications, they can seriously open doors. Now, let's rewind back to the interview process for a sec. The materials mention some pretty interesting questions that potential assistant clinical psychologists might get asked, those curveballs they throw at you. What are some examples? Okay, so we've talked a lot about the people skills for this role, that empathy, really connecting. But let's not forget about the science side of being an assistant clinical psychologist. What does the knowledge base for this career actually look like?
You're spot on. It's not enough to just care, right? You need to back it up with solid knowledge of how the human mind works. The materials really emphasize a strong grasp of human behavior and performance, individual differences, and all those different approaches to assessment and treatment.
So what are we talking about specifically? Hit me with those core knowledge areas.
Well, no surprise here, psychology is at the top of the list, like
Yeah.
79% emphasis. Think solid grounding in human behavior, personality types, how we learn, research methods, the whole shebang.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You got to have that foundation to understand those assessments, to make sense of disorders, to know which therapeutic techniques are going to work.
Exactly. Then right behind it is therapy and counseling. Coming in at 69%, this covers everything from diagnosing and treating mental health conditions to, believe it or not, even career guidance and support.
It's like you're not just pointing out problems, you're giving people the actual tools to deal with them, right?
100%. Now, this one might surprise you. Public safety and security, clocking in at 60% relevance. This goes to show you how much mental health professionals are needed in law enforcement, correctional facilities, social work, all those fields.
Whoa, so it's almost like being a psychological first responder.
Kind of, yeah. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention customer and personal service at 56%. Basically, this just emphasizes how important clear communication is, building rapport with patients, treating them like, actual people.
It always comes back to that human connection, doesn't it?
Always. Last but not least, we've got education and training at 51%. This one speaks to the importance of psychoeducation, basically, teaching patients about their condition, what their options are, and how to cope with it all. Really empowering stuff.
Wow, we covered so much ground today, it's almost dizzying. From outsmarting AI recruiters to figuring out what those patient stories really mean, it's clear being an assistant clinical psychologist is more than just a job, right?
It's about combining a real desire to help others with, like we said, that deep understanding of the human mind. And as our world keeps changing, this role, it's going to be more and more crucial in shaping how we think about and deal with mental health.
Totally. So, to everyone listening who feels that pull to make a difference, what if you were at the forefront of that change? What if you help shape how mental health is understood and supported? Just something to think about.
Now, those are some parting words to inspire some action. The possibilities are truly endless.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, we're calling it a wrap on our deep dive into the world of assistant clinical psychologists. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.